collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up on the programme this week, a landmark ruling brings an end to discrimination against privately educated students entering the University of Cyprus.
We are going to win because it's not the time to send our best minds outside of the country.
We discuss mental health issues, especially with regard to young people.
Young people nowadays use alcohol, they use drugs because it's helpful at the time, but essentially at the long run, it's a lot more unhelpful, and it alienates you from people around you, alienates you from your family, alienates you from yourself.
And a three-masted sailing ship will dock in Larnaca and welcome visitors.
The Italian Navy bought it, and since then, since 1951, she started to be used as the training ship for petty officers of the Italian Navy.
Earlier this week, there was an announcement that the University of Cyprus will now be able to allow other students who didn't go to public schools in Cyprus into their courses. It's something that's been going on for quite some time, and the rector of the University of Cyprus is Konstantinos Christofidis. Konstantinos, first to clarify for people, what, until this ruling, was the regulation as far as entry to the University of Cyprus went?
As you know, every summer we have the national exams, and students that can join the University of Cyprus by passing these national exams. Of course, there is a ranking of students. We are getting the best students every year, but this was the only way to join the University of Cyprus. And as you know, this is a problem because in international universities always they have different ways to get students, sometimes with international criteria, international exams and GCs, international baccalaureate, and other kind of exams. So for us, this wasn't allowed. But now, I mean, this is great news for the university.
Can I just interrupt there and clarify yet again for people who haven't followed the story, that basically the way it was meant that students who had attended private education schools in Cyprus were almost excluded unless they took the Pan-Cyprian exam, which was based on a different syllabus.
Exactly. This is true. And the way is that actually the Pan-Cyprian exams are exams that you have to follow a certain kind of education. So it wasn't fair for all students. It wasn't fair for people that they are in the private schools, for example. So this is why we, as university, we want to be able to choose students with international exams, international criteria.
Why can't you just say, these are the criteria of the University of Cyprus? I'm presuming that most, if not all, of the courses are in Greek. So if you have...
well, yes, but now the university also is changing a lot because we have new courses in English now.
Okay, but it would have been the case that as long as you could pass or spend a first year studying Greek to pass a proper Greek exam so you knew you could follow the course, that if your other academic qualifications were high enough, you could get in.
Well, there is a certain law, and we have to apply this law, and unfortunately we have a certain kind of problems concerning the autonomy of the university to be able to choose the students, and this is a problem. What do we want? We want to be able to use different kind of exams, different kind of entrance exams to get our students, because it is very important to have students from different communities, different standards, different schools, private and public schools, because to have students from all different kind of systems, This is very important for our educational system.
And from different nationalities, for example. I mean,
We have
opportunity.
refugees. Of course, we have refugees. We have, the Cypriot societies today is changing a lot. If you just read the name of our students, just the surname of our students, you will figure out that there are names that they are not anymore just Greek names. There are names from everywhere. And this is very important for the country.
It gives a much broader base to the research and the other things that the university is concentrating on. I want to talk a little bit as well about how you're climbing the ladder in terms of excellence in global universities, because you've had great results.
Yeah, no, we are doing very, very well. But again, I would like to say also that this fight, for example, to be able to get students from different disciplines, from different schools, it's very well connected also with the internationalization of the university. And it's very, very important for us. Now, concerning the international rankings, we are doing very well. I mean, there is no any more rankings that come out without the University of Cyprus. There are 27,000 universities around the world. And to be among the 300, 400 universities in the world, this is a great achievement for a small country. And also for a university which is only 27 years old. So, for example, if we take the European research programs, we are doing very well. I mean, this year we were able to attract more than 50 million euros, which is almost the budget of the university. And also, take, for example, the most prestigious European grant. The most prestigious European grant is ERC, European Research Council grants. The University of Cyprus has 14 ERC grants. The whole Portugal maybe has 10. Can you understand what is the meaning of that?
So what is the difference now going to be that you've got this ruling from the Attorney General? Because I think it's still not possible for a student who graduates with a baccalaureate from one of the schools in Cyprus to just come to the University of Cyprus. He's got to apply to somewhere else, go there and then get transferred. Again, it seems a little bit of an oxymoron.
Yes, you're right, but it's something anyway. It's a start. It's a start. So what do we want? We want to give the opportunities to students from different schools to apply with different criteria. So this is our final target. And we will get it. I'm very optimistic about that.
How do you get it? Has this got to go through Parliament now?
Yeah, it's going through Parliament soon. But now, for example, a student that he has a registration in any university around the world and has the appropriate exams, from now on, it's able to apply it immediately. So this is a great achievement. It's something new.
Let me just get this straight. I'm leaving school, I apply to a foreign university, I get accepted, and then I can immediately apply to the University of Cyprus, and if you accept me, I don't take up the place in the foreign university.
Exactly.
All right, but it's another hoop for private school students to jump through, isn't it? What is the problem with the politicians here who are adamantly against you being able to accept, let's face it, most of the people in the private schools in Cyprus are Cypriots?
Well, you're 100% right, but the problem is, as you said, is with the politicians and with the unions.
What's their problem? I don't understand why they're saying these kids, because their parents paid for their education, shouldn't have the same opportunity.
It's better to ask them. It's better to ask them. I'm asking this question for the last 11 years. I can't understand. I think the problem is with the unions, the teachers' union of the high schools, because I think they are afraid of the competition. They're afraid to see their children to be compared with other, students from private schools. Maybe this is the reason. And also there is a story of the private lessons. Like pass these national exams. You have to go through a very, very expensive private lessons.
Most of which are given, as we know, by government teachers against the law.
Exactly. And there is no free education in Cyprus. I mean, even the children that go to the public school, they pay as much as the children that go to the private schools. So there is no free education. This is just a myth. In Cyprus, we are living with myths, and we generated myths.
Let's end on a positive note. How do you see the immediate future of the University of Cyprus now that this is the first, as we said, rung on the ladder towards free acceptance of the most talented students from anywhere?
Logic is going to win. It's a question of logic, you know. I think at the end, this discussion in a few years is going to appear like history. We are going to win because it's not the time to send our best minds outside of the country. And, you know, people around us these days, they are speaking about reserves of natural gas and reserves and these kind of things.
We're not investing, are we, in our human reserves?
Exactly. The most important is reserves of young people, young students. And we have to keep them in the country. They can give us back a lot of things. You know, we have to understand that the dimension of a country is not proportional to the geographical dimension or to the dimension of the population. The dimension of a country is completely proportional to the dimension of the minds of the young people. And this is why we have to keep them here. And this is why we fight to keep them here. And we will fight until the end, and we will win. Logic is going to win because we are right. For the last, you don't know how many accusations I go through the last 11 years. You can't understand. But I am here. And at the end, logic is going to win.
The rector of the University of Cyprus, Konstantinos Christofidis, being very frank and rather pleased about that landmark decision from the Attorney General earlier this week, saying that children who haven't gone through the public school system here in Cyprus and followed it with the Pan-Cyprian exam can now get a place at the University of Cyprus. Mental health, particularly concerning young people, is a growing problem both in the UK and now it seems in Cyprus. Joining us this week is Haris Markou. He works in the NHS in London as a psychotherapist. Haris, what exactly do you do and why do you think there is this sudden increase in both the demand for the services of mental health practitioners? What is it that's bothering our young people?
Just to briefly explain what I do, I work as a cognitive behavioural therapist in a very busy service in West London, where we see people from the ages of 16, 17 until, I guess, that we have no limits in terms of intake. There's a big increase in the last couple of years in London and generally in the whole UK. And as you said, in Cyprus as well, about mental health problems. People have started being kind of recognized as a lot of difficulties that come with, I guess, socio-economical factors, difficulties with jobs, difficulties with relationships. People are talking about this a bit more. So I personally think the problems have been there. There's a lot more recognition of it. So what I generally do with people is I offer them an assessment after they see their general practitioner. And following an assessment, we work on understanding a bit more about their difficulties and what they can actually benefit from the type of therapy we do. It's a brief term psychotherapy. What we do is we have 6 to 12 sessions where we work on understanding the origin of their difficulties, what are the symptoms of their difficulties, how does that relate with the research that is basically influenced by the National Institute of Clinical Excellence. So that defines our therapy and the guidelines we practice. As well as we do work a lot with people that, I guess, they have difficulties with anxiety, depression, panic, phobias.
But you say that you think it's because we're talking about it more. Some people would say it's because the way of life, our lifestyle has changed, that there are more pressures on people, and possibly with social media those are much more to the fore because you're sharing more with people and leaving yourself open to maybe criticism or comments and things which undermine self-esteem and so on. So is it that it's just we're talking about it more, or is it that there are actually more people now experiencing these difficulties, and we used to be able to cope with them because they weren't so frequent?
I think you have a point there in terms of people being more exposed to things that actually affect their mental health. So technology, social media is one of the big factors that people...
Especially young people.
Especially young people, yeah. I do see a lot of young people in London that suffer from difficulties with low self-esteem. So low self-esteem is one of the treatments that we offer as well, where we help people understand a bit more about how they see themselves, how they can start using specific tools that we give with the therapy so they can start improving the way they see themselves.
So you're talking more here about self-help rather than medication, because the other area that has caused quite a lot of controversy, I think, in the past years has been how quickly some people dole out medication for mental health issues, especially among young people.
Absolutely. There was, for decades and decades, doctors were prescribing medication whenever they came across a person who had mental health difficulties. There wasn't much understanding of how these difficulties were to come about. There was only, I guess, their training as medics to actually prescribe something that might actually help them elevate their mood, but the origin of the problem remained there.
And very often they also got addicted to the pills.
Absolutely. It's not only a physical addiction, it's mostly a psychological addiction, where you find yourself less empowered because you rely on a medication to actually deal with your difficulties. So there is the placebo effect of taking the medication that is actually helping you, that might be actually more beneficial than the actual chemicals in the medication. But I feel in terms of the direction that mental health is going nowadays, there's a lot more funding that comes from general practitioners, from the government, a great push from a lot of non-government organizations as well in offering psychological therapies to people who are affected from common mental health difficulties to people who are veterans, people who come with traumas from wars or tours. So it's quite common for us to actually see people that either suffer from one or multiple traumas.
Well, let's talk about one of the ones you dealt with recently, I believe, and that was the Grenfell Tower fire.
Yes, exactly. So just to explain, I work in the borough next to Kensington and Chelsea. It's Hammersmith and Fulham. It was a horrific incident. And I guess as a service next to that borough, we're one of the first services to volunteer, and we are asked as well to actually have presence from morning until the late evening, going out in the streets and offering people psychological support either on the spot.
How did you approach people, or did they come to you? I mean, you presumably had a little setup there with other medics and so on, and people could come and talk to you or whatever, but what was the feeling that you got from some of those people? Because it's very hard for us who saw it on television or whatever and thought how dreadful, but to even comprehend the feelings and fears of people who escaped it but whose neighbours perhaps didn't, and so on and so forth.
I think in terms of the setup we had, there was a massive push. So we had social workers, we had immigration services, there was obviously the mental health services, medics, paramedics. People were not only coming to us, we went on the street, we went knocking on doors, wherever in all neighbourhoods around the tower.
And what were people's biggest problem?
Biggest problem was that they lost a lot of people that they knew, friends, families. Children witnessed this. Parents were shocked by what happened.
So it was bereavement, but because it was so sudden and in such horrific circumstances, harder to deal with. And
if you know the area at all, that tower is visible from almost a kilometre away, so there was a massive range, a big radius around, or people actually have direct view to the tower that was burning for over 5-6 hours.
So even if they weren't directly affected, it
No.
had a psychological effect.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's traumatic to actually see that and experience that.
Let's come back to the whole issue of young people. What would be your advice to, let's say, a teenager? Because we know, of course, that a lot of them now go through anorexia or other eating disorders, and this is all down to mental health issues. But what would be your advice to a young person who is feeling that they need some support because their life is, probably they don't feel they have control over their life?
I think that's a quite common issue, not only in teenagers, in adults as well. But I guess if I have one advice on teenagers, I guess we all have and we all had some issues, but it's good to start talking about it. Talk about it to your friends, talk about it to your family, talk about this. Start being accepting to advice from people. If you feel that you need help, it's okay to ask for it. There is a distinction in people's minds about physical health and mental health. But the only distinction is that you can't actually see mental health difficulties, but you can see physical health problems.
What about the stigma that's attached to it, particularly still in Cyprus? I think it's being overcome in the UK because there's so much talk about it, both in the media and in the general population. But here in Cyprus it is still, I think, rather stigmatised.
Yeah, and it has to do with the culture in Cyprus, where people were talking about things before and they were just getting over it or just kind of pushing it on the side and getting on with life. That's what I guess Cypriots learn, how to kind of cope with things.
So is that unhealthy? If you can manage to cope doing it that way, it's the old British stiff upper lip, isn't it, from years ago? But is it better... Does it work for young people, or do they now internalise it and then have serious mental health problems?
Well, I guess not everyone that goes through a trauma or difficulties in their lives comes out with having difficulties. But what we see nowadays is a lot more people coming out and saying, yes, I am suffering from low self-esteem or from difficulties with how I see myself, or difficulties coping with stress or panic attacks or phobias. And I guess it relates a lot to kind of that, what you talked about, internalizing it, going over it, not sharing it with people.
So do we say that the advice to young people is to have an open mind, an open heart and open ears to your peers, so that you can all discuss these things and, in a sense, get it off your chest before necessarily you come to someone like you and ask for medical help?
Yeah, that's the best thing you can do. Use your support network, use your family, use your friends, and also try to take care of yourself. Don't use unhealthy coping mechanisms to deal with difficulties such as the issues we talked about. Young people nowadays use alcohol, they use drugs because it's helpful at the time, but essentially at the long run it's a lot more unhelpful, and it alienates you from people around you, alienates you from your family, alienates you from yourself. So you need to be open to yourself and open to others. That's my advice.
Very good advice too from psychotherapist Haris Markou, talking there about mental health issues, particularly in young people.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Lovers of maritime history are in for quite a treat in the coming days, because the Italian Navy has chosen Larnaca as one of its ports of call for the sailing ship Palinuro. What's it used for? Why is it coming to Cyprus? To tell us, we're joined by the Italian ambassador to Nicosia, Guido Cerboni. Guido, tell us a bit first about the history of the ship, because it looks like something from the 1900s, but it was actually built, I think, in the middle of the last century.
It was built in 1933, and in 1934 it was launched. And it was used for the first years as a fishing boat, actually, in different parts of the world. Then, in 1951, the Italian Navy bought it, and just to replace the previous training ship Cristoforo Colombo, which we had to pass to the Russians, to Soviet Union, as part of the war reparations. And since then, since 1951, she started to be used as the training ship for petty officers of the Italian Navy.
But it's a tall-masted ship. Now, was it built that way if it was built as a fishing vessel, or was that added later when it became a training ship?
It was built like that, actually. Of course, it was renovated completely, as I said, but the structure, the main structure, was there. So this has been her function since then, to train the cadets of the Italian Navy, the petty officers, and to promote also the image of the Italian Navy, because where in the ports they stop, the cadets has the opportunity to present the ship, to explain their life on board. And it's this kind of ship, the one that is more appropriate to develop a sense of belonging, sense of tradition, and also to uphold, that sense, the traditions of the Italian Navy, and a team spirit.
But it's also, I suspect, a very good way of learning seamanship, because a little bit like modern cars tend to do an awful lot of things for drivers who then don't learn, if you like to call it, roadcraft. A tall ship, do they climb up those masts to set the sails? Does it teach them how to read the sea? Because that's all very important, even if they go on to serve in one of the much less attractive, let's be honest, modern Navy vessels.
Indeed, you are quite right. This is the kind of ship where you can really learn how to become a navigator, learn seafaring, and how to manage the winds, how to understand the winds, how to understand the sea. But they follow an intense course. So they on board, these cadets, at the end of their academic year, they follow a very intense course on seafaring, on safety, security, and all the subjects related to seafaring and to the Navy. The tasks of the Navy in general. So it's really a good field to be trained.
What do you think it is about these old, tall-masted ships that so appeals to the public? Because the great thing while it's here is that you are allowing and inviting the Cypriot public to go on board and have a look around. So what do you think it is that attracts them to it? And what will they see when they go there?
Well, I think this kind of ship is always in our memories of young boys, of our novels about seamen and so on. So all of us, I think, we keep inside the image of this kind of ship. And they are always attractive. They're always attractive. So I'm glad that we have this opportunity for the public in general in Cyprus, and especially I hope for children and young boys and young ladies to come on board and to see how it works. Because this is the real, it gives the real impression of what is navigation, navigating at sea. As you said, like in modern cars with automatic speed and so on, everything, you don't really feel the pleasure of driving. On this kind of ship, you really feel the pleasure and you understand the difficulties of navigating.
Now, it's an outreach, if you like, from Italy to all the different ports that it goes to. As you said, it promotes Italian seamanship, the Italian Navy, and indeed Italian culture. But it was also used fairly recently, I think, for a very high-level meeting, wasn't it?
Yes, in Trieste. In last July, in Trieste, it was used for a summit meeting within our Prime Minister Gentiloni, Chancellor Merkel, and President Macron. So it is also the theater of many important meetings. it was at that time there was a meeting on the Balkans in Trieste. The ship was docked there, and so they took the opportunity to hold the summit on board, which is very secure, I mean, because
And what else can you tell me about the ship?
Well, about the ship is now, it has been used all over these years, as I said, for training of the cadets, and every year they have a cruise, either in the Mediterranean or in Northern Europe. They call at different ports. On these visits, we try also to organize a cultural visit for the cadets. So I thank really the cooperation, the Ministry of Defense and the National Guard for their cooperation, because they organized for the cadets a program of activities, for instance, the visit to the Maritime Museum in Ayia Napa, the visit to some archaeological sites, and also to the Rinia, to the museum.
So they'll get a little bit of shore leave as well?
Yes, yes, definitely. It's also for them important to know the countries where they call, to understand the culture of the place and to meet the people, because sooner or later they will become petty officers, they will be on board of modern ships, and the Mediterranean is our sea, is our destiny. It has been for centuries. It will be also for the future. So these young men and women, because there are also women among the cadets, will have to operate in the Mediterranean. So for them, it's the good start to know the different parts of the Mediterranean. They were in Malta, they went to Piraeus, they are coming to Cyprus, then they will go to Rhodes.
And we're all Europeans at the end of the day.
Yes, yes.
Now, the opening hours for visitors are varied on the 29th, the 30th and the 31st of August. So when can people go? Because there are certain visiting hours, aren't there?
Yes, I invite the people in any case to come on the website of the embassy, but yes, we have different hours on the 29th of August between 10 to 12 in the morning and 4 to 5:30 p.m. Then on the 30th of August, between 10 and 12 in the morning, this remain unchanged, and in the afternoon, 4 to 7. On the 31st, the same, 10 to 12 in the morning and 4 to 7 in the afternoon.
And what will people see on board? I mean, have you been on board yourself? Do you know what they can expect to see? Because they can't presumably go to every part of the ship, but there are certain areas, I imagine, that the crew take visitors to see in particular.
Yes, on the decks is already interesting. I mean, to see the control room. I mean, of course, there are parts of the ship that are not accessible. I had the opportunity to visit the ship in Leghorn several years ago. But what is important, when you get on board and you see these masts, high masts, and the sails, I mean, it's like going back in time. I mean, so it's a very fascinating experience.
So if you want to be part of that experience, then I do suggest that you head down to Larnaca to visit the sailing ship Palinuro, which will be open for visitors between the 29th and the 31st of August. You'll find more details on the website of the Italian Embassy in Cyprus. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.